This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, nononsenseforex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 230 is brought to us by Bybit. I'm going to say it again, and I know you guys are sick of me saying it, but I don't care. Congratulations, traders, on what had to have been another amazing week for you. But what I wanted to mention today was the Bybit card, which I'm seeing more and more of out here in Latin America. What's really cool now is you guys know Tether is a big part of the Bybit ecosystem. You can earn Tether back with every purchase. But now, because of what Tether is doing with gold and their XAUT product, you can earn gold back on every purchase. I'm over here dying to find a way to get either gold or Bitcoin back with every purchase I make. You can do that right here, right now. And if you sign up through my link, you get so many more bonuses on top of everything Bybit already gives you. Go to the show notes, click on the Bybit blog, read it, click my link at the very bottom of that blog and get yourself signed up, get yourself into this ecosystem. It is so worth it so many times over because with Bybit membership has its rewards. It is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and just so you all know, I had this episode slated for this week, for the last few weeks, actually, back when Bitcoin was comfortably over 100,000. Now that it is in the $95,000 range, as guys like Rick Rule famously like to point out, arithmetically, I like it even more now. You guys already know my stance on Bitcoin and how bullish I am on it long term. But you really need to listen to this episode start to finish because I personally don't think you are bullish enough. And we need to point out some facts now that we're halfway through Q4 of 2025 because I really feel the need to put all of this into perspective, and I think there is no better time than right now. So let's start with the bad. We have seen a pretty big dump in Bitcoin these last couple weeks, and this has mainly been triggered by whales dumping. There's a great company out there called Santiment, and they have their fingers on the pulse of these movements, especially from whales. Now, I don't know who these whales are so much or what they know. Whales are normally people who bought Bitcoin at a very low price. And so when they decide to move, especially to the downside, because a lot of whales, if you already bought a bunch of Bitcoin back in 2013, you don't have as much of a need to buy now at these prices. They still do. But typically when they move, they are selling. And when they move in coordination like this, it always makes me wonder why. Are they talking to each other? What are they doing? I guess we'll never really know. So there's no reason to speculate. But we do know that their coordinated selling efforts has been the catalyst for this last move down. Now, are these whales, are they all Bitcoin maxis? Well, some of them might be, but I know all of them cannot possibly be. And some of them are just probably good investors or have learned about investing over the years, which tends to happen when you get into Bitcoin. And some of them have probably discovered gold. And so I'll bet that some of this move down, especially over the last few months, has been due to the rise of knowledge in the gold space and how great of a store of wealth it is along with Bitcoin. So the combination of some of these whales selling off and just a lot of people in the Bitcoin space diversifying into gold, this has led to where we are right now. And if I ever do talk about technical analysis on the show, I typically save it towards the end, but let's go ahead and kind of start with it this episode because the monthly price chart for Bitcoin against the United States dollar looks a bit rough right now. I mean, go pull yours up right now and tell me what you see. Are you currently getting a bearish signal? Might you be getting close to a bearish signal? Or is the situation to where you haven't gotten one yet, but unless next month is just amazing, you're probably going to end up getting a bearish signal in December? I don't know what your algorithm looks like, but I would be willing to bet that one of those scenarios is likely true. And then if you want to go ahead and go further and pull up a chart of MSTR, Strategy Incorporated, formerly known as MicroStrategy, you will see that the situation there is even worse. Now, oddly enough, as just an aside, this typically brings altcoins down even more, but not this time. I don't know what to make of that. This has been a very Bitcoin-specific move. But if you want to go even further in terms of what we talked about last week, could a recession be on the menu? Maybe pull up S&P 500 and then go to the weekly. We might be getting bearish signals there as well. And generally, that has not been good for Bitcoin either. We finally did, in the last few months, we've seen some divergence between Bitcoin and the triple NASDAQ ETF, ticker symbol TQQQ. But I am personally waiting for a real downturn in the market to see if that correlation still holds. Now, as far as a recession goes, you normally have like a real catalyst for that, like the housing crisis or the dot-com crash or COVID. We don't seem to really have anything like that currently. There is a looming credit crisis, which will take us down at some point. So it kind of begs the question, if we do see a move down, is it going to be more like 2022, or is it going to be more like 2008? Well, you would need a major reason for it to be something like 2008. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We can't predict recessions like we talked about last week. You simply can't, so why bother? But the technical outlook is not very rosy. Now, charts are not always right, as we know, but they do give us a pretty good idea of what's going on at least. And as of right now, we are only slightly up on Bitcoin for the year. Now, the price at the beginning of the year was $93,700, right in that range. So you can almost say we've more or less broken even for the year in Bitcoin. And with all the excitement we had about Bitcoin in 2024, we certainly expected bigger results in 2025. And we just simply have not gotten them. And not only that, the technical outlook is not looking good. Assuming that the price action holds for this month. Now, the month is only half over. And as we know with crypto, a lot can happen between now and 15 days from now. But that's where we are, and it could certainly be a lot worse. I mean, this is crypto, after all. But we certainly expected it to be a lot better than this for the year 2025. But moving on to the good, and there is so much good, contrarians. Stay tuned for this. Let's talk about the year 2025. What has gone on just in this year, 2025? So much. We may have not gotten a W on the actual price of Bitcoin, but we have scored monumental endgame type. I'm going to say this again. End game, final boss type wins for the year 2025 in the Bitcoin and crypto space. When it's all said and done, I don't care what the price of Bitcoin is. 2025 has been the biggest W for the crypto space in recorded history, and it is not even close. I can't even emphasize how not even close this W has been for 2025. So let's begin. Let's not forget that the most pro-crypto administration in the United States got sworn in early 2025, which was a complete 180 from the administration we had before. Now, this alone would make 2025 a huge win for us here in the crypto space if you're looking long-term, which we do here. But the knock-on effects from this administration coming into power is what has really been eye-popping for this year. So let's get started. For starters, as of today, from one of my favorite websites out there, ETF.com, they reported either yesterday or today that ETFs in the United States, Bitcoin ETFs, have had $24 billion in inflows in 2025. So price be damned. Inflows are up $24 billion in this calendar year. And ETFs in general are much stronger hands than people who hold it on the blockchain. It's merely an age generational experience thing. And with these ETFs, it's not just individuals holding, it's institutions. And because these institutions are not rich by accident, they understand the long-term game, and they have much, much stronger hands than your average investor. Now, VP, who are these large banks and institutions, you might ask? Well, I'm so glad you asked that question. Because let's talk about the banks who are now in on Bitcoin and are going to be offering services if they don't already. But banks and institutions who entered the game in 2025 who were not in the game before. Again, brand new entrants this year, primarily as a result of the pro-crypto administration we have in the United States right now. Again, remember, these institutions may have been bullish on Bitcoin and crypto for years, but they also have a fiduciary duty to their clients, and the juice just isn't worth the squeeze if they're constantly having to fight the United States government. I get it, but the floodgates opened up in 2025, and let's see who came in. Again, if we could have just gotten one of these institutions on board, it would have been the biggest win of 2025. Oh, but it wasn't just one. And remember, too, I always said it's not about how many individuals get on board with Bitcoin. It's the institutions and the banks. This is where the game is actually won. Now, I do think there's probably one step after this, and that's when Bitcoin starts going into pension funds and 401ks. But we're probably a little ways away from that. But man, you want to talk about floodgates. Let's just talk the top 10 banks that came into the space this year in 2025. And let's start with JP Morgan Chase. If we just got Chase this year, it would be a monumental win, but it's certainly not the only bank. But if you guys ever listen to Jamie Dimon, never listen to what Jamie Dimon says. Only pay attention to what he does. I told you before, he was bad-mouthing Bitcoin. He was bad-mouthing Ethereum. He was bad-mouthing all of crypto, not because he actually felt that way about it, but because he was buying time. He was stalling because he was eventually coming in. And this year, JP Morgan Chase is in, along with Standard Chartered in the UK. Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. My God, if you've ever seen the movie Trading Places, the biggest Mortimer Winthrop type financial institutions out there that I can think of are both in the game now. I don't think you guys understand how large Goldman Sachs is, how large Morgan Stanley is. Let's keep going. U.S. Bank, definitely in the top 10 of banks in the United States. They're in. BNY Mellon. People don't understand how large this bank is. They might actually be bigger than Chase. This is where people like me will never have an account because they only handle large businesses and institutions. But it is absolutely one of the largest banks in the entire world. They are in. Citibank is in, a top 5 American bank. DBS Bank, one of the largest banks in Singapore, is in. And then you have the 2 largest banks in Spain, BBVA and Santander, which, let me tell you, have gigantic presences in Latin America. So pretty much all of the biggest banks in the world, or the vast majority of them, just now came into the space in 2025. Please allow time for this to sink in. I could just end the show now. We're not crazy, we're just early. Goodbye, everybody. See you next week. I could stop making episodes for the rest of the year. We've won, contrarians. This is the biggest W I can possibly think of. I would have been so thrilled just to get Chase and Citibank in, not even this year, next year maybe. But not only did we get them this year, we got all of these other almost equally as big banks in as well. Please remember this next time somebody tries to poo-poo Bitcoin. I mean, look, if JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Standard Chartered, Citibank, BNY Mellon, if they're all wrong, but Tyler from Nebraska is right, okay, I'll take the L here. No problem. But I really, as contrarian as we are here, I would not want to take the opposite side of this bet, seeing who is on the other side. I mean, we're talking trillions on trillions of assets under management here. However, getting all of these banks on board was not even the biggest win of 2025. Oh, not by a long shot, contrarians. Does anybody out there know what I'm about to say? Let's just take the assets under management of the top 3 banks in the United States. So you have JP Morgan Chase with about $3.79 trillion. Then you have Bank of America, which we did not mention. I don't even know if they're on board yet. Maybe they will be soon, with $2.66 trillion. And then Citigroup with $1.83 trillion. So if we add that up, it's round up to 4, 6.5, about $8 trillion in assets under management. Trillion with a T. There is an institution out there who holds more assets under management than these 3 banks combined. Again, can anybody now tell me who it is? Here's a hint. They said earlier this year, 2025, that they were never going to do anything with Bitcoin. And in less than 12 months, they have already flipped and now said that they will. You still don't know? It's Vanguard with $11 trillion in assets under management. They are now in. Game, set, match. Sorry, Maxis, I know you don't like TradFi in the game, but we were never going to get to where we wanted to get to without them. We needed them in. And now they're not only in, like the largest institutions in the world are now in. Vanguard was the crown jewel in all of this. Vanguard has so many of the top ETFs in the space. Their main S&P 500 ticker, VOO, alone has $1.5 trillion in assets under management. One stock ticker. Now, I pulled up the top 5, thinking that I knew what some of them were going to be. Like, there's some gigantic ones that I follow, like VOOG, VTV. I mean, those 2 are behemoths, but they weren't even in the top 5. If anybody cares, the top 5 are in order: VOO, VTI, which is their total stock market ETF, BND, which is their bond fund ETF, which we did an entire episode on. That's number 3, VUG, and then VEA, so the growth ETF and their developed markets ETF. And even number 5 is around $185 to $200 billion assets under management. And they have many more past the top 5, not just the other 2 that I named, but a lot of them I'm not even thinking about that you have probably heard of, and they are quite large. Like, just when you thought getting JP Morgan Chase and Citibank was kind of the end game, along comes an institution that makes these banks look almost small by comparison. And they're all in Bitcoin now. And likely other cryptos too. If they're not already, they likely will be down the line, but that is another topic for another episode. Now, if you want more bullishness for 2025, you had central banks also buying. You had the usual suspects who also buy more, like El Salvador and Bhutan. But just this past week, the Czech Republic got on board. And you could say that the United States and UK added to theirs, but they more or less just confiscated Bitcoin from criminals, and they're not selling it, they are keeping it, which isn't technically a buy, but they have added more to their holdings by quite a bit. And again, it almost doesn't matter how much these countries or these institutions have added in 2025. It's really just the fact that they have opened the door and they have stuck a wedge inside of that door. As far as this wedge goes, the best example I can think of is when BlackRock did this back in 2024. They really opened the door for a lot of this before the new administration came into power. It's like just open the door and stick a wedge in there so the door's not going to close. From there, so many different possibilities open up. And we, as Bitcoin investors, were really hamstrung for the longest time because these doors just simply wouldn't open. But in 2025 especially, they almost all opened. Really big, gigantic, Game of Thrones style doors went from closed and barred and locked to unlocked and open. And you're going to tell me you're not bullish because price has gone down recently? Don't end up like the meme where everybody lines up for a $125,000 Bitcoin, but then nobody lines up for $95,000 Bitcoin. I mentioned yesterday on X. You can follow me on X, by the way. Links down below in the show notes if you don't already. But I took a quote from Mark Yusko, who has more money than God, and he made a great point. It's the same point we make here. It's just a better way of articulating it. And he said, investing is the only place where when things go on sale, everybody runs out of the store. Like how stupid is that, right? And it's so true too. Most investors are like this. That's why we're different. That's why we are contrarians. Because why would you want to be like them in any way? I mean, we can all sit here and say that we're not them, but if you're acting like them and behaving like them and investing like them, then you are them. With all the bull cases I just explained, coupled with the fact that we have more or less broken even so far for the year 2025, this is the very definition on steroids of sweet divergence. Take the gift, my God. On that note, let's move into the solutions portion of this podcast episode. I mean, we talked about at the top of the show how the short-term outlook or short to mid-term outlook for price maybe doesn't look too rosy, but who cares? Just stack. You need to condition your mind to not worry about what the price of the thing is. You just want more of the thing. This is where Bitcoin maxis really get it right. This is where silver stackers, for example, really get it right. They don't really worry about the price they paid for the thing. They just want a lot more of the thing. That's all that matters. They don't care what price they paid for it. Maybe for bragging rights and to flex then maybe at that point price becomes important. I don't know, but they just want more of the thing because they know what we know, and that is the fact that these things are what protects us from our own failing fiat currencies. And so the more you have of them long term, the better. That's it. You guys know that I bought more Bitcoin for the first time in a very long time back when price was at 120,000. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm thrilled, actually. I just wanted the Bitcoin. I wanted to secure more Bitcoin, and that's what I did. And for anybody out there saying, well, you could have had it at a cheaper price now, VP, you are completely missing the point I just laid out these past 2 minutes. You are not one of us. We are stackers. We are gold stackers. We are silver stackers. We are Bitcoin stackers. And we just want more of it. Not just from the protection it gives us, but as a nice little side bonus from the extraordinary bullishness that we also believe these things give us for the future. And if you didn't already know, it should be obvious now that the doors of bullishness have swung wide open in 2025. Almost everything we have been waiting for as Bitcoin investors happened in 2025. And did I also mention that it's a finite supply? I think I did a whole episode on that. Yeah, that hasn't changed. The timeline might be delayed a bit when you have downturns like this because more Bitcoin comes online. But we're still going to run out of it. That's going to be a fun time. So step one, if you aren't in this headspace already, is to have a stacker's mindset. Instead of saying, well, the technicals look like price is going to go down, so maybe I should wait. If you recall, depending on how long you've been with this podcast, I did that back when Bitcoin was at $16,500. I had a $10,000 price target. And that's generally a good thing. That's discipline. I said, okay, if price hits this target, I am absolutely unloading. And price never got there. And I essentially missed out on those prices, those really nice low prices we saw back then. But if you remember too, back then, I had a different outlook on Bitcoin than I do now. My outlook on Bitcoin back then was not as a store of value. I even said, I was like, look, stores of value don't drop 80% in 1 year. And I think back then I was correct to say that. But now, I believe it absolutely is a store of value. It is 25% of my entire net worth. It is and will be protection against my falling fiat United States dollar, even with its short and midterm volatility. So I'm treating it differently. I'm no longer saying, I'm going to wait for it to hit this particular price and then I will buy some. That's what I do with stocks. Now, that's what I sometimes do with altcoins. This is not the same category. I tell people when it comes to gold, silver, Bitcoin, if you want it, just get it. Just get it now. Stack. Don't play this, I think I know where price is going game, even if you're good at that. This is why I've set my allocation to 25% gold and 25% Bitcoin, because at all times it forces me to buy more if my ratio of 25% cash is getting too high. Now, I will say if you want to play it this way, we talked last episode about the gold to Bitcoin ratio on the monthly chart. Very helpful, by the way. I think it's a good guide in terms of what to be stacking right now, just like a lot of people do with the gold-silver ratio. So if you're wondering, which one to stack now, not financial advice, but maybe according to that chart, gold would actually be a better idea right now. And then when that chart decides to turn over, maybe then it's time to buy Bitcoin. That's up to you. The important thing at the end of the day is that you're diversified across all of these asset categories. I would be willing to bet a lot of you still aren't. You're too heavy into one camp. I would even see it in the comments section on YouTube. This podcast does go to YouTube, by the way. If you ever want to leave a comment, feel free to go there and leave a comment. And give us a thumbs up while you're there. But for example, back in 2024, we more or less broke even on things like gold and silver, but did extremely well because of crypto. And back then, I would get comments from people who say, well, why would I invest in gold and silver when it doesn't go anywhere when I can just invest in the Bitcoin? Because all that does is go up. Well, because we were right and you were wrong. You need to be diversified. Like I said, 2024 was a great year for us because of crypto, even though a lot of our other stuff didn't move. To where this year, 2025, has been another amazing year for us in contrarian land, simply because of gold, silver, and uranium alone, whilst we ended up breaking even on a lot of our crypto positions. You guys see how this works? Good. Now, what am I actually doing personally? I always try to be pretty upfront about this. I'm not buying anything because for the first time in a while, I am pretty damn low on cash, and that sucks because I really want to buy more gold and Bitcoin. But unfortunately, I just can't, and I need to be a good boy and get those cash reserves back up. But that's just life. I'm in South America right now on business, and this business has cost me money to start it. And I'm doing some other structuring stuff. And if you guys followed me on X, I've recently bought silver bars. And all of these things require cash. So that's where we are. If these things go up, cash has to go down. But I'm very, very much okay with that. I have this character trait about me that I think is a really great character trait. I almost always spend money on things that make me more money. I've always been this way. I don't know if I've ever said it on this show. I might have said it on one of the other podcasts. But when I was a kid, like all the way back to second grade, when I first learned about what the stock market was, I was never envious of people who had like nice cars or a nice home or really nice clothes. If anybody had something that I wanted, it was always, the people who had a really great investment portfolio, had like stocks and had gold. I'm like, I want that. Why can't I have that? And this carried forward into adulthood and into middle age. And man, that's a really great character trait to have, because when you spend cash on things, you tend to not ever really regret doing that, win or lose. I've told you guys I've been financially free for a long time now. And much of this is due to my desire to buy things that pay me back and or protect my money over time. So if I can get you guys over to this way of thinking, even a little bit, then I feel like I've done my job, because, man, it really does pay off over time. But let's not let this mentality take away from what we're really talking about this episode. I just got done telling you all the amazingly bullish things that happened to Bitcoin in 2025. And you now get the opportunity to buy it for the same price as you could have bought it in 2024. I don't know what else I can really tell you at this point. But even if you see a bearish forecast for Bitcoin in the future, it doesn't matter. Not financial advice, but buying at these prices right now is the complete opposite of crazy. You're still just very early.